Welcome back to Midday with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. His website is pocan.house.gov. Congressman, you're still with us?
I am.
Okay, let's bring in Laura and listening on WCPT in Chicago. Laura, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. Thank you so much for the Voter Rule Integrity Act. I already called Representative Jan Schakowsky and asked her to sign on. And I wanted to ask you to look further. Bob Petrikis and Harvey Wasserman of Ohio have a book out called The Strip and the Flip. And the strip is the voter registration rolls, Jim Crow, voter suppression, and the flip is the actual flipping of our votes, the manipulation of vote totals on electronic machines, on central tabulators by political operatives, and now by external hackers. We need something for the flip, too. Can we talk to you about that? Can we call your
Laura,
office and talk
you know
to you?
what? We already have something. Keith Ellison from Minnesota, Hank Johnson from Georgia, and myself have introduced a bill we call the SAFE Act, and here's essentially what it does. One, it puts our election infrastructure under the definition of critical infrastructure, which is what we put our financial systems and our utilities, so that provides the utmost protections. Second, it requires that all electronic voting machines have a paper ballot trail, so we have something that we can verify and count and recount. And third, it makes sure that we have a random 5% auditing after elections, which is a great disincentive for anyone trying to do something to hack. So essentially, you'll after an election, you'd randomly audit 5% and make sure that they match the number totals. And finally, it keeps the commission in place that the Republicans earlier this year voted to get rid of, that when there's a patch to these machines, the private company right now has to send it to this commission to get approved, and then it goes to the municipalities that have the machines. Without that commission, they'll do a patch, it'll go right to the local communities, and you have no safeguards whatsoever, so it does that. So we do have those protections in place, Laura, and I think that that's something, again, you might want to call your members again about, but it's called the SAFE Act. And that one, I should know the number. I don't offhand, but it has been introduced already.
Okay. Judy in Friendswood, Texas. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom, and hi, Congressman Pocan. I appreciate both of your helps. We need to be better informed, and that's what you both are doing for us. A little while ago, you and Tom mentioned about a public option possibly could be put into this health care reform, maybe, and I would like to see that, at least that done. But so I can be armed better when I talk to my friends who are not understanding this. Can you tell me how that might work if we actually got it in for this health care reform time? Would it be open to everyone? And just a little bit about how that might really work.
Sure. So, Judy, let me say two things. First of all, I mean, it will be difficult, I think, to get Republicans to necessarily go there because this is not where they fall, and clearly they've shown a priority is not there. But if you're really going to fix a system in the best possible way, this would be the best possible fix. This would say that there's actually a public health care option for people so that instead of some of these areas where they have a single firm now offering something under the Affordable Care Act, you'd have a second option for people, which then is entering real competition, at least into that marketplace. But more importantly, it's a public, it's the government offering a health care option to people who might not otherwise have it. Now, to be completely clear, the most important thing I think down the road we could do if we're really going to talk about what's the best fix, I would argue is something along the lines of single-payer Medicare for all systems. We now have 112 sponsors of that in the House, so that's the most we've ever had, and I think much of this debate has led the public to there. This is when we're slowly bringing the elected officials to match where the rest of the people are at. But a public option would be a fix for the ACA, but I think there's other fixes, too, that can make sure that 20 million people don't lose their health insurance, and we protect things like pre-existing conditions and that women don't pay more than men and there's not a lifetime cap and all the other things that are important that came with the Affordable Care Act.
Wouldn't all that be covered under the rubric of health care as a right rather than a privilege? And if so, would it require a constitutional amendment or can rights be written by law?
Well, I mean, if we did Medicare for all, I guess, it can always be changed, right? Because if it's not a constitutional right, that could be changed. Although I think the practical application of you put something that big in place, it's not easy to take away. I mean, trust me, the Republicans would love to privatize Social Security and they'd love to voucherize Medicare. but it's an uphill lift because it's currently in place. So I guess, yeah, anything could go away if it's not in the Constitution, but it certainly makes it politically much more difficult pragmatically to do.
Yeah, the power that Republicans love to complain about of entitlements. Rob in Phoenix, Arizona, listening on KPHX. Rob, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, thank you. Hey, I've got a couple ideas for cost measures on health care outside of the, obviously, the health care for all that you have already discussed. And basically, they need to get rid of the in-network, out-network contracts, because that's just another way of milking people. You know, you go in, and I have a personal thing where I went in, and I asked the hospital, you guys in-network? And they said yes. And then every doctor I saw after that was out-of-network.
Right.
The other issue would be to basically not allow any business to offer health insurance. I don't go to my business, you know, and ask them for auto insurance. And you want to spark competition, get rid of that. And that has a couple advantages, because right now people are not hiring low-wage earners over 30 hours because they have to offer, you know, if they're large enough, they have to give them benefits. And my kids are all experiencing that. No one will give them over 30 hours. Plus, if you get rid of it as a small business, you don't have to compete with that and deal with that headache.
Rob, so, you know, again, that's why I think a lot of us, you know, look at the healthcare for all, Medicare for all option, because, you know, we've had this conversation in the past where, you know, the auto industry, for example, you make a car in Detroit or you make it across, you know, the waterway into Canada, and I forget the exact dollar figure, but I think it's more than the price of steel is the price of healthcare.
I think it was $2,200 per car was what Toyota cited about 6 years ago when they moved when they built their factory in near Toronto instead of Ohio or Tennessee or wherever they were debating doing it.
And you know, I can tell you from my business what I put out in you know for healthcare, I could probably almost hire another person to then actually work in the business and create that, you know, stimulus effect by having another person working in a family supporting wage. So there's no question, I think, you know, if we could do this, this would be a huge boon to American business. The problem is we're still fighting the overall greed factor of the wealthiest and of the biggest corporations that never want to do what they're supposed to. But, you know, that's right now our victory is stopping this really, really bad bill so we can get to the table to fix healthcare as it needs to within the constructs of the Affordable Care Act.
Margie in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. You're on the other air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Mark, I was wondering if there's anything that can be done about unscrupulous landlords taking advantage of low-income tenants. I recently assisted a family getting in a home, and one of the things that they're doing nowadays is they're charging $25 per adult just to apply for an apartment with no guarantee that they'll get an apartment. So when you're apartment hunting, low-income people can spend hundreds of dollars just trying to get an acceptance to apartment. Then they have to come up with first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit. So 3 months' rent up front, plus the money to turn on utilities and everything. Low-income people don't have that kind of money.
No, absolutely, Margie. I wasn't aware that that's something that's starting to happen, especially in Wisconsin, right? We haven't seen those kind of things, you know, previously. You know, just off the top of my head, I would say make sure you reach out to some folks in the state legislature, maybe who can affect that maybe most directly. This should be something I would hope that would be nonpartisan. But again, I guess these days it seems like everything can turn into something partisan. But you're right. I mean, if you're making multiple applications, you have no guarantee. This seems like this is something that can further hurt people who are on lower income. And we already have enough problems, especially with the Trump budget as proposed, that would really affect people on the lower income spectrum in housing.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Midday with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. You can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan, MarkPocan. And his website is pocan.house.gov. And there's also a Facebook page for it. How do you find that, Congressman? Just put in Mark Pocan?
Yeah, Rep Mark Pocan. And then I just tweeted out the link also on that petition.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this.